Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to 3 News Now. I'm Stephanie Haney. Today is Monday, November 16th. I've got your top stories from WKYC.com and our WKYC app. Thank you so much for choosing to be here to get filled in on everything that's impacting you here in Northeast Ohio. How about those blackouts yesterday, huh? That weather kind of rolled in on us. Of course, we knew to expect it because our incredible weather team let us know about it, but quite the change from about 12 noon to about 1 p.m. And according to FirstEnergy's outage map, there were still thousands without power this afternoon. So if that is you, definitely thinking of you at this time. Hopefully you're able to get any of your perishables saved from the fridge and all of that good stuff. My power went out right before kickoff yesterday, before the Browns game, literally at about 12:57 p.m. So I was definitely with you if you're someone who was without power yesterday. Speaking of the Browns game yesterday, happy Victory Monday. Congratulations to the Browns. They are dealing with some stuff today, though, when it comes to COVID, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, let's talk about yesterday's win over the Houston Texans. The Browns beat the Texans 10-7. Now, that was instead of winning 16 or 17-7. So let's talk about pretty much the second to last play of the game when Nick Chubb did not score that final touchdown, ran it all the way down to the 1-yard line instead of doing that. And also, by the way, they didn't win by 16 or 17-7, but they also didn't lose, which is something that could have happened. Now, I will tell you, I didn't get it at first. I saw that we had less than a minute left in the game, that we were up by 2 scores with that touchdown, and didn't really understand why I wouldn't have gone for it. But it was explained to me, and so now I get it. It would have been entirely possible for the Houston Texans to quickly score a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion, onside kick, score a field goal, and then win the game. And I know that's not likely, but wouldn't that be a very Browns thing to happen? So that didn't happen, so thank you, Nick Chubb, for that. But I will tell you, he is on my fantasy football roster, so that didn't help me, but I'd rather have a Browns win than a fantasy win anyway. Here's some of the things that people were saying about it online. My Sports Update said, Nick Chubb doesn't care about your fantasy team, and that's true. He doesn't care about your fantasy team. MPS from CLE replied to my tweet about this. He said, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is a W. Chubb is a smart football player. Both backs rushed for over 100 yards, referring to running back Kareem Hunt there. MPS from CLE said, great game. And his teammate, Mac Wilson, said, Nick Chubb, I'm so grateful and honored to have a teammate like you. And he tweeted a crying face. So obviously, smart football from Nick Chubb, bringing home the win. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in the rest of the AFC North. The Steelers handily beat the Bengals yesterday, so they are now 9-0, and it really pains me to say that they are undefeated at this point, but they are. But the Browns and the Ravens are now tied for second in the AFC North, both with records of 6-3, and we do meet the Ravens again. Of course, we meet the Steelers again as well, so that'll be something to pay attention to. Let's talk about a record that is finally back in the Browns' hands that is, quite honestly, a little bit embarrassing here, but with the Browns' win on Sunday, the Cleveland Browns finally have the record back for most wins by a single quarterback at FirstEnergy Stadium. And before that, the record belonged to Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger. He previously had 11 wins at FirstEnergy Stadium. But now Baker Mayfield has that record back with 12 wins as Cleveland's starting quarterback. Congratulations. Thank you, Baker Mayfield. Thank you, head coach Kevin Stefanski. Thank you to the entire Browns organization for changing that embarrassing record back to the Browns. And Mayfield has a chance to even improve upon that record because there are 3 more home games this season. Next week, the Browns host the Philadelphia Eagles. That's at home. And then there's a home game against the Baltimore Ravens. That's on Monday Night Football on December 14th. And then we will see the Steelers back at home taking on Ben Roethlisberger and the rest of the Steelers on January 3rd to close out the regular season. So again, congratulations to the Browns on bringing that one back home. Now, something else going on with the Browns, though. They had to shut down the facility again today because of another positive COVID-19 test because of a player. They released a statement today, very similar, if not exactly the same as the statement that came out on Friday when it turned out that offensive lineman Chris Hubbard had tested positive for COVID-19. Now, Hubbard was isolated. He sat out Sunday's game, and they were able to get things back up and running that afternoon. So, of course, we'll be following this. Also, last week, if you'll remember, Baker Mayfield had to quarantine after he came in close contact with a staff member that tested positive for COVID. Now, Baker didn't test positive, and he was back at practice on Wednesday. So, of course, we will keep you updated once we find out who that player is and anything that's going on with closures at the Browns facility. But there was very good news today in the world of COVID-19, which is not something that we get to share with you very often. So here is this good news. Moderna now says that its COVID-19 vaccine is almost 95% effective based on the early results here. So exactly what they said was 94.5% effective. And if you remember, just last week, Pfizer announced that its own vaccine appears to be about 90% effective. So this is great news. Based on what we're hearing from these companies, they say that they're on track to apply for emergency use approval from the FDA within weeks. That is great news. That is definitely what we wanted to hear. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious disease expert, said the news out of Moderna was very impressive. Now, if both of these vaccines are approved for that emergency use within weeks, there could be 70 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine available by the end of the year between these two companies. And that would be great news. And it's at a time when we desperately need it, especially here in Ohio, because we've got those new numbers in from the Ohio Department of Health. Cases are still at an incredibly high number. And now here in Ohio, we are officially over a total of 300,000 reported COVID-19 cases that we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic, since it first touched down here that we know of in Ohio back on March 9th. So in the last 24 hours, there have been 7,268 reported cases of COVID-19. It was last Thursday when we first saw over 7,000 cases, and every single day since Thursday, we have had over 7,000 new reported cases of COVID-19. We had over 8,000 reported cases on Friday, but every day throughout the weekend, we saw over 7,000, almost 8,000 reported cases of COVID-19, and the number today being 7,268. So again, obviously, you guys know this is not where we want to be. The positivity rating for positive tests over the last 7 days, that's averaging at 12.5%, which is well above that World Health Organization recommended threshold of 5%. In the last 24 hours, 20 new deaths have been reported, and there have been 213 new hospitalizations. We've now seen 193 increase in the active hospitalizations. The total number of people who are in the hospital right now is over 3,000 again. It's at 3,387, with 850 of those people being treated in an intensive care unit. So that's 1 in 4 people who are in the hospital in Ohio for COVID are being treated in an ICU right now. Now let's take a look at the national and the global numbers so you can see where we stand compared to the U.S. and compared to the global population. We are now over 11 million reported cases in the U.S. That's according to Johns Hopkins University, and the total number of deaths in the U.S. is now at 246,684. And with 4% of the global population, we have 20.3% of the reported COVID-19 cases, which has gone up in the past days, and 18.7% of the reported COVID-19 deaths. That's not because our deaths are going down. That's because deaths are increasing at the global level. Globally, the total number of cases is now at 54,678,159, and the total number of deaths at the global level is now at 1,321,403. Now, as we try to grapple with this here in Ohio, the interim health director has signed that order limiting gatherings in Ohio. These are those private gatherings. Governor Mike DeWine talked about this last week. He said this is in response to the, quote, rampant spread of the virus as a result of banquets, weddings, receptions, and other social gatherings. So some of the things that got attention here: if you're having a gathering, there can be no socializing or activities in open areas, no dancing, which is something that people took a lot of issue with. Again, a lot of people making those jokes about the movie Footloose where dancing was outlawed, but obviously this is very serious here. The guests now have to be seated at all times, except if it's a traditional wedding event like a first dance, a toast, tossing the bouquet, or cutting the cake, specifically allowed in this new order. Also, if you're serving food and beverages, guests have to be at their seats. Here's something: no self-serve buffets and no self-serve bar areas. Now, if you've ever held a large event where you had to feed a lot of people, you know that table service is a lot more expensive than buffet service. So that's something that people are definitely going to have to think about as they look at handling these events. Now, of course, the number of guests are limited, so you may cut down on your cost there, but a lot more expensive for table service than it is for buffet service. So keep that in mind as you're planning what you're going to be doing with these events if you will be having events like these in the future. Masks have to be on at all times, and you can't have more than 10 people at a single table. And if you do have that many people at a table, they all have to be from the same household. Now, this order was still signed by the interim health director and goes into effect on Tuesday, not yet signed by the new director of health department, Stephanie McLeod. This was signed by Lance Himes. We continue to hear about more things that are being impacted by COVID-19. The 2021 Cleveland Auto Show has been postponed, and they are planning now to reschedule it and make it happen, but it will not be happening in the spring of 2021. An official said today that because of Ohio's restrictions on mass gatherings, it won't be held in the spring, and while the closure of the IX Center has also impacted it, they do think that would be the best possible place for it to be, but are open to having it at the convention center in downtown Cleveland, as has been done in the 1980s. Now, a word on the IX Center. Yes, the IX Center as we know it will no longer be open, but the building is still there. It's owned by the city of Cleveland. But IX Center Corporation was the tenant there for a long time, and that's been where the auto show has been for the past 20 years. So the city of Cleveland is still trying to figure out what to do with that building and to find a new tenant for it. That's not to say there won't be some sort of situation where there are events still able to be held there, but it is not the IX Center anymore. But the building is still there. As of right now, the building isn't going anywhere. Now, as Governor Mike DeWine said last week, he is looking at potentially the possibility of having to close bars, restaurants, and fitness centers if we don't get these COVID numbers under control. Well, now the owners of those establishments are talking about suing to stop that from happening if the governor does go ahead with that. And he said he would address this on Thursday of this week if the numbers don't go down. And by the way, they're not going down. As I said, the last 5 days, we've had over 7,000 new reported cases every single day. And as cases go up, the medical experts say it's only a matter of time before those numbers of deaths go up as well, because once you do contract the virus, it does take time to run its course. So keep that in mind. But here's what people are saying. Craig Stevens, who spoke on behalf of Planet Fitness, said that he doesn't think that any fitness center wants to be a part of a lawsuit. They want to be a part of the solution, but they're prepared to be a part of a lawsuit if they have to, and that fitness centers should be able to stay open because they improve public health. In this specific instance, Stevens is kind of putting the onus on the bars and restaurants. He says they're social activities, they're places where people go to convene and hang out, but fitness centers are where people go for solitary enjoyment, often by themselves, to work out and get physical activity. Now, from a legal perspective, as a lawyer, I would say that Stevens makes a good argument here for differentiating the fitness centers from the bars and restaurants. But Sam McNulty, who's the owner of Market Garden Brewery in Ohio City, said that this is just a case of overgeneralizing, and that he said it's like in school where bad students get all the attention and kind of hold the rest of the class back. There are some bars and restaurants that aren't following the rules and are increasing the COVID-19 spread, and others that not. And he said in his establishments, they're using the same UV air filtration technology in their establishments that the Cleveland Clinic uses in its hospitals. We reported on this a few weeks ago. And McNulty said that it's when the people leave the restaurant and bar that the real problem is happening, and that the spread is not happening in bars and restaurants, but it's happening at the party afterwards. However, I haven't been to that establishment. I haven't been to any bars and restaurants really since this all started in March. But I'll tell you what, if you take a walk through the flats any day, it doesn't really look much different than a house party to me, just from a casual observer walking down the street with my dog. So I will say that. Now, attorney Ed Hasty, who has been involved in previous shutdown lawsuits, said, obviously, people are upset. People are scared, basically because of the pending devastation that's going to come. But to make the industry, the bar and restaurant industry, the scapegoat for this is to be really, really shameful. And he said there's a 100% chance of lawsuits if restaurants and bars are forced to temporarily close. And he is urging people to write the governor and also your state representatives and state senators to let them know how you feel about this. So that's what Ed Hasty, the attorney who's been involved in these cases, has said. Now, the unpopularness to some of the actions of Governor Mike DeWine extends beyond the owners of bars and restaurants and fitness centers. Now, DeWine, elected as governor here in 2008, that was 2 years into President Donald Trump being elected president back in 2016. He's up for a re-election in 2022, and President Donald Trump tweeted today, "Who will be running for governor of the great state of Ohio will be hotly contested." Now, you might be wondering, why would President Donald Trump tweet that today when DeWine won't be up for re-election for 2022? We just had this latest election. Well, on Sunday, Governor Mike DeWine went on CNN and he said that it is clear, certainly based on what we know now, that Joe Biden is the president-elect. And that transition, for the country's sake, it's important for a normal transition to start. He said the president can go on his other track and his legal track, and we should respect that. But we also need to begin that process. So perhaps President Donald Trump took note of that and is now taking issue with Governor Mike DeWine. Governor Mike DeWine, by the way, was the honorary co-chair of President Donald Trump's Ohio re-election campaign, did defend him throughout the campaign, but he is now one of the few people in a top Republican position who has recognized Joe Biden as the president-elect. Now, speaking of the president's lawsuits, by the way, his latest election lawsuit in Wisconsin was just withdrawn by the plaintiffs, so that is no longer moving forward. This is probably a good time to let you know that there's a brand new podcast. I have a new podcast. It's called 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney. And our very first guest talks about how, why, and when you might want to talk with people and connect with people who you disagree with politically. My guest was Dr. Tanya Israel. She's a psychologist and author of the book Beyond Your Bubble. We had a great conversation. She talks about not only the main reasons you might want to do this, beyond just necessarily persuading someone or getting someone to change their mind, or just even connecting with someone, just the different reasons you might want to do it. It's a great conversation. Other things in the podcast include hidden secrets of our great Northeast Ohio in a segment called Need to Know in NEO. First up, we have Tiffany Tarpley sharing her favorite hidden gem about Northeast Ohio, and then a good social media follow in a segment called A Good Follow. This is somebody who will make your social media feed better. So you can find that article up on WKYC.com, or you can search for that podcast by searching for 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney on your favorite podcast platform. Go ahead and check that out, and go ahead and subscribe and rate and review it, please. And also do the same for this podcast, 3 News Now with Stephanie Haney. That's it for your early update here on 3 News Now for Monday, November 16th. I'll see you next up on What's New with your Trending Stories segment in Clicking in Cleveland. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more 3 News Now. Everyone stay safe and be well, and I hope everyone seeing this has their power on by the time you watch this. I'll see you back here tomorrow. I'm Stephanie Haney.